Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in this morning. This is episode 13 of the Sell More Printing webinar. This webinar is aimed at helping you grow your print business using today's best marketing tactics. I'm Rachel Neese. I'm the marketing director here at Marketing Ideas for Printers. And today we're going to look at 7 tips for effective website sliders. So here's the thing. Once you get your prospects and customers to your website using like the tactics we've talked about in episodes 1 through 12 of this Sell More Printing webinar series, now you need to keep them there and use the components on your website to direct and inform them as you see fit. So website sliders can play a huge part in this. And before we get too far into this, I suppose it's important for me to answer the question, what is a website slider? So simply put, website sliders are pretty much just what they sound like. They're little slideshows for your website. Most of the time they're on the home page, but not always. For website subscribers from Marketing Ideas for Printers, the tips in this webinar will help you better customize your sliders. And if you weren't aware, yes, you can customize those sliders. And if you're not a website subscriber, these tips are not specific to our website, so they'll be helpful for your website sliders as well. So let's get started. The first one is this. It's all about priorities. The key thing to remember about website sliders, especially sliders at the top of your homepage, is that they are taking up your prime real estate on your website. So use that prime real estate wisely. You have to. This is not the place that you want to just slap things up in a hurry because you want to get a message out to your audience. Nope. Remember here that first impressions matter. The first impressions that your website sliders are making are critical and they matter. So this is your one chance to make a good first impression. When visitors show up on your online doorstep, what do your sliders say about your business? So let's take a look at this one. What is this slider? What does this website lead you to believe? When I look at this, and this is just the notes that I jotted down, but I might wonder or assume, it looks like they're trying to do their website in-house, that they probably don't have a lot of experience in that. They probably don't have a design background because they're not familiar with resizing text and images, like you can see by the really squished "You are today's big winner" at the top there. And it gives me the impression that they're probably trying to save money, which makes me wonder if they're successful. So just keep that in mind, that the impressions that your website sliders make will give your visitors, allow them to come to conclusions about your business. So are they coming to the good conclusions, the right conclusions that we want them to get to from those sliders? The next one there, under It's All About Priorities, is that order matters. So along the same line of priorities, remember that the order of your sliders, if you have 4 sliders or whatever, the order that you put them in also makes a difference. The first one is this: your interest. Put your most important sliders first. So your interest and the click-through rates are going to steadily decline after your first slider. So if you have something that you don't want your visitors to miss, make sure it's on your first slide or on your only slide. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Next, use themes. So here's another tip. If you're going to use a series of sliders, choose a theme that all of the sliders will fit within. Sliders move really rather quickly as little snippets, and your website visitors are going to kind of tend to get banner blindness, is kind of what they call it, if your sliders are so random and so quick that they're not allowed time to retain anything. So let's look at a couple of examples to show you what I mean here. So I'm going to give you a second, and I'm going to wait a little bit and have these sliders just kind of run through. And I want you to try and read them in their entirety, like you're proofreading them for grammar and understanding. Okay, so we've been all the way around now. So now if I asked you, what was the third slider about? Would you remember? I mean, can you even get close to an idea of a theme? My guess is you were working so hard to try and read all of the words on those sliders that you had a hard time retaining or understanding what those sliders were actually about. So remember, this is the idea of sticking to a theme and think clear and concise. So here's another example. This one's from Toyota. The first thing you should notice is that the sliders have really slowed down. But the other thing that you probably are picking up on is they stay with the theme. All of their sliders are featuring 2019 models with, big call to action buttons there, and the only text there is talking about the payment and cash back options. So they're relying on visual attraction, putting the fancy pants car on there for you. And then they want the image to draw you in, and they don't want to use the paragraphs of text that you're struggling to read so fast. So that's a good example of how you can really make effective website sliders. Next, if you're looking to customize your sliders or to keep things fresh on your website, consider doing something like quarterly themes. So like the first quarter, you could have each slider in a series feature a short, like 5 words or less short, testimonial. Remember here to think of that visual impact that's going to have as well. Maybe the next quarter you do a series that highlights a product feature. So for example, if you have an online design tool for your print buyers, like the Design Edit tool that we offer here at Marketing Ideas for Printers, you could have a set of sliders specifically on that product and on the importance of designing online, the things that you're offering around designing online. The set series could be on that theme. And then quarter 3 there, like the Toyota example, you could have all of your sliders feature your current promotion. So maybe if you combined quarter 2 and quarter 3, so let's say you're doing a promotion on Design Edit. Well, the sliders in your series, make your first slider about saving 25% on business cards. Make your second slider on saving 25% on flyers, and all of them have the start your design button. So they're all kind of the same, but they're, featured around a theme, but slightly different with different products, but same promotion. So that's kind of the idea of using a quarterly theme. The main idea here is just to think of each set of sliders as one campaign with a consistent message. Number 3. So this is kind of a twofer. You get 2 tips for the price of, well, you get 2 tips. The first is to think about how you're going to attract the eye of your visitor visually. So you want to think about attracting visually. And the second, or 3B, is to choose your visual speed bumps accordingly. So what I mean by that is this. On average, according to industry standards, you have all of 15 seconds for your website to make an impression on your customer before they decide whether or not to stick around. So something has to catch their eye visually. And if your homepage has a slider, it'll most likely be that. I can't even say my spiel in 15 seconds or less. So the question is the content on your slider the single most important thing you want the visitor to see? Because you only have that short window. So keep that in mind. So take a look at this. Look, it's Dave's birthday. Great. Who's Dave? Should I care that it's Dave's birthday? Does it affect me in some way? Wait, am I even on the printing company's website? So that's a perfect example of what I mean by the most important real estate here. I'm sure this company loves Dave and wants to wish him a happy birthday, but is it the most important thing for all of their website visitors to see? Probably not, no. So side note here, this is just for fun. This doesn't actually belong to a printing company, so just so you're aware of that. Secondly, use eye-catching images. The best engagement of website sliders across the board typically comes from an image gallery. So try and do some product, gallery images. You guys, I know all you printers put out phenomenal looking products, stunning products. So if possible, lay them on something, get a palette, make them pretty and have a photographer take some pictures of those pieces so that you can use them on your website and create that stunning imagery for people to really, grab a hold of and catch their eye right on your website. If you can't do that, if you don't have a photographer, you're not comfortable doing that, you can't find any great pieces to feature, you can use stock photos. But if you do, I want you to remember these tips. So first, people are naturally attracted to smiling human faces. So if you're using stock photos, pull some that have, you're looking at their face. It's the face that draws you in with their eyes and their smiling face. Bright colors, those bright colored backgrounds are also going to grab your eye. People will follow the eyes of the person that they're looking at, so you can draw attention to text on your slider by having the eyes look towards it. So if you notice that girl in the bottom right corner there with the hot pink background, more than likely you looked up at the girl above her because her eyes are looking up. If I were to use that image of that girl on the bottom there in the hot pink on a slider, I would put my text right above her head because her eyes are naturally directing me up to look at that text, and that's how you can kind of highlight that. So just keep that in mind when you're creating that. Next, I want you to remember that candid pictures are best. So instead of these cheesy, awkward poses, use images that look more natural. It's highly unlikely that the people in your office are standing around posing with their thumbs up. It's just not natural. So instead of doing that, if you're going to use stock photos, look for pictures more like this that are candid. These look more like, a friend grabbed their phone and snapped a picture of them just because. They're a lot less perfect, but they're a lot more authentic, and that's what you want. It grabs you in, you feel you can relate more when those images are more authentic and not so cheesy perfect. Okay, number 4 here is to watch your sizing. I'm talking about your image sizing that you're placing and using within your sliders. So do you remember how we talked about your sliders taking up your best real estate? On a web page, you want your most important information above the fold. I'm sure that's a familiar term to a printer, or in other words, before the scroll. So if your visitors have to scroll down to see the bottom of the slider, it's too big. Several times I've run across custom sliders where the printer has used a vertical or portrait image instead of a horizontal landscape image. And when this happens, it makes the slider as big as the image, bumping it lower on the page and then ultimately taking up way too much space. So what's worse then is having that series of sliders and only one of them has an incorrect image size, but that causes all of the other sliders to jump dramatically in size from one slider to the next. So you'll have an image that fits right, and then the next one it bumps and is way too big, and then your eye jumps back up to the right size, and it gets pretty messy. So remember, you want to catch their attention, but you want to do that in a good way. So it's worth your time to do these sliders well. And if you're a subscriber and you ever run into an issue with sizing of your images for your custom sliders, be sure to reach out to our customer care team and keep that in mind. It's worth it. Number 5 is less is more. So remember, your visitors have mere seconds to engage with you, so don't clutter it up with too much text. So here's what I want you to think. I want you to think one sentence or less if possible. Don't be thinking in paragraphs. They just won't have time to read it. And then test it. Have a friend look at it. If they can't fully read the slider before it moves, you have too much text. And yes, there's, website or slider accessibility things where, they can pause the slider on either side, but they're not going to pause it if they can't read it in the first place. So yeah, so just keep that in mind. Make sure that it's less text, not paragraphs. And then remember, people don't read websites, they skim them. So make sure that it's skimmable. Think back to that Toyota example I showed you. It had like two buttons, very little text, very easily skimmable. Also, when you're doing this, shoot for 3 or less sliders. And here's why. So your engagement is going to drop after the first slider. So if you, have a really awesome first slider and a really awesome second slider, but you just threw in sliders, 3, 4, and 5 because you just thought you needed to build up the slideshow, don't, just skip it. The engagement is going to drop and it might end up slowing you down. So secondly, that's my next point there, is you could potentially slow your site speed by having a ton of sliders. So if it's not bringing you real value or making a great impression on your website visitors, just skip it. Faster site loading speed means better SEO. So just keep that in mind when you're making your sliders. The other reason I think you should shoot for 3 or less is because too many messages equals 0 message or no message. You're going to end up confusing your customer if you have multiple sliders and messages. So in that previous example, you're trying to read about one thing and then all of a sudden, whoop, it switches and you're trying to read about something completely different. And then all of a sudden your mind has to switch to the next one. And then you just walk away with nothing. You have no message there at the end. So keep that in mind to stick with 3 or less sliders. That brings me to my next one here. Number 6, don't rely on your sliders to communicate critical information. As much as we work, all of us work to invest in getting these sliders to look great and communicate effectively, and you planned out your themes and you did all these things, remember, it's still possible for your visitors to potentially scroll right past them. The world moves fast and people show up on your website because they have a mission. They're looking to, do something on your site, and your slider is your visual speed bump. So it's highly possible that they might just speed right past that speed bump and get on to what they came there to do. So because of this, don't depend on your sliders for important announcements about store closings or your power went out, so all of your orders are backed up, or whatever it is that you put on there. Don't rely on that for that. If you are wanting to make an announcement like that, like I've seen several of these in the last week or two over the 4th of July, saying, they're closed for the 4th of July. If you are going to have a slider like that, have only one slider for the duration of that announcement. You're going to have a much greater chance of that message getting seen than if that message gets lost in a slideshow. So for example, for the 4th of July, for that 1 week that you put it up there that you're closed on the 4th of July, turn the other sliders off. Have just that one slide if you're going to use it like that to communicate essential information. Also, along those same lines, remember that using one slider all the time is okay too. Just because our websites give you the capability to add more sliders doesn't mean you have to. The same thing here. If slider 1 and 2 are awesome, they look great, they turned out great, but you just throw in, a less awesome 3, 4, and 5, it's not worth it. Just leave them off, put your best foot forward, and you'll have better effectiveness, better sliders. Number 7, so lastly, here are some ideas for what you can put on your sliders. We talked about these a little bit before, but I'm just going to run through them some more here. So the first one is testimonial sliders. You want to remember to keep these short and sweet. You're thinking like 3 to 5 words. If your testimonials are getting too long, you need to make the slider say something like, see what our customers are saying. Or actually, that'd probably be more like, hear what our customers are saying. And then link that to a testimonial page. Create a custom page on the website that lists all the testimonials and use the slider then as your shortcut that just brings them over to that page. The next one then is to feature article sliders. You could use feature articles where you just highlight, feature article, you put a little title and then a read more link. Here you could link to a white paper within your website, or you could link to a blog post, or maybe there's a great piece of content. Maybe there's an ideas collection tip if you're one of our subscribers that you want to feature. You could create that and just have a link to read more. Remember, you're featuring the things that are great about your website. It's just showing in this case that you are an expert in your industry. You provide knowledge through content. You've got additional content that they can read. And so that is building up your expertise, even though it's not a direct order printing or, design online. It's still having effectiveness to show your content invitation. Lastly, here is promotional sliders. You're running these as, again, if you're doing more than one, having a theme of promotional sliders. This is a really great example of a promotional slider here. I just found this one, Michael's online. But they use bright colors. There's very few words. It's eye-catching. It ends tomorrow, that it lasts 4 days, that it's mega, it's big. And all that information is just communicated in 8 words and a stunning image. So keep that in mind when you're doing those promo sliders. Some final tips I want to leave you with. The first is give them an action to take. So put a call to action button on your sliders and keep them consistent if possible, because again, if you have 3 sliders and one says you're supposed to order print, one says you're supposed to send a file, one says you're supposed to call for a quote, it just too many messages. So keep them clear, give them an action to take, and make it easy for them. The second one is test every slider you create. Can you read it fully? Can you understand it? And does it answer the so what question? How will it benefit your website visitor? For example, that Happy Birthday Dave one, that really offered no benefit to me as the website visitor. So I see this a lot with printers making sliders of their awards. They'll take a picture and they'll list the awards on their slider, which is great. Congratulations. But as your website visitor, you're looking at that and, well, how does that benefit me? So make your text there something like results you can count on. Well, then all of a sudden it's turned back to me and how your awards help me have the dependability and reliability that I'm looking for in a printer. And it just flipped it to me instead of it being about you and how awesome you are. The last one there is to make a great first impression. Remember, you are the expert. Prospects and customers, they're coming to you and your website because they believe that you're the expert on design, you're the expert in print and direct marketing. So does your website slider also give them that impression? Be super critical of this, because you can bet that your audience is. They're going to be judging if you know your stuff by those initial images and what you're doing on those website sliders. So keep that in mind and invest some time here, and you'll be better for it. Yeah, so that's all I have. I've come to the end. Thanks for joining us. The next webinar will be Wednesday, August 14th at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you have any questions or comments about today's webinar, or you have future topic requests, be sure to reach out to us. You can give us a call at 701-241-9204, or you can email me directly at rachel.neese@mi4p.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope to see you back here in August.